I remember the way his fingers clamped around my collar, the fabric choking at my throat as if he wanted the whole church to hear me gasp for air. My shoes scraped against the polished floor, squealing, echoing through the pews while every head turned. Dad's voice thundered, sharp and venomous. "Pigs don't sit in God's house." His spit landed hot against my cheek. I heard the whispers first, then the laughter. And over it, the clicking sound my mom lifting her phone, snapping pictures like this was the funniest spectacle she had ever witnessed. My knees buckled when he flung me against the steps outside the chapel. I tasted blood in my mouth, copper sharp against my tongue. I looked up and saw my sister Melissa, in her satin dress, her lips curling like she'd just been crowned queen. She covered her mouth, pretending to be shocked, but her shoulders trembled with laughter. "Don't worry, Dad," she sneered. "She's finally sitting where she belongs." Please subscribe to our channel and tell us in comments, from where are you watching this video? The church doors creaked shut behind me, cutting me off from the choir still humming softly inside. I pressed my palm against my chest, trying to steady the rage rising like bile in my throat. Across the street, a couple of boys from school leaned against their bikes, watching, their smirks carving deeper into my humiliation. Mom raised her phone higher, tilting her head for the perfect angle. "Smile, piglet," she laughed. "You'll want to remember this blessing." I wanted to scream, to claw at her phone, to burn that moment before it could live forever on her screen, but my throat locked. The more I stayed silent, the louder their laughter became. My silence was their favorite fuel. I tried to push myself up, but Dad's hand shoved me back down so hard the gravel bit into my palms. "Stay where you belong," he growled low, just for me. His eyes, hard and black, bore into mine. "Don't you dare crawl back in there like your family." And then they left me there. They didn't even check if I'd get up. The church doors closed, the crowd inside carried on, and I was left with the sting of gravel embedded in my skin and the echoes of laughter still buzzing in my ears. When the sermon ended, families poured out, polished shoes clicking, children clutching hymnals, women clutching handbags. A few avoided looking at me. Others smirked openly, nudging one another. One woman whispered loud enough for me to hear, "That's the girl they always say was cursed since birth." Melissa strutted past me, holding Mom's arm like she was royalty. Dad walking ahead as if he hadn't just thrown his daughter into the dirt. She leaned down just enough for me to hear her hiss, "Next time, don't take my seat. Maybe then Dad won't remind you what you are." I watched their backs disappear into the car, their laughter drifting out the rolled-down windows. I stood slowly, dust and blood smeared on my skirt, my throat raw. My chest hurt, but not from Dad's grip. It hurt from the weight of being erased, humiliated, treated like dirt in front of the entire community. That night, silence sat at our dinner table like another family member. Dad's fork clinked against his plate as if nothing had happened. Mom scrolled through her phone, showing Melissa the photos she'd taken. They cackled, zooming in on my face, pointing out the moment Dad's fist tightened around my collar. Melissa laughed so hard, tears slid down her cheeks. "You should post it," Melissa said between giggles. "Title it, 'How to Drag Trash Out of Holy Places.'" Mom nodded, grinning. "I might, or maybe I'll save it for the family album." Dad didn't laugh. He just chewed, swallowed, and said, "She learned her place today." His voice was steady, satisfied. "And me?" I sat there, quiet, my food untouched, my eyes fixed on the scratches across my palms. I swallowed every word I wanted to spit out. Every scream, every curse, every desperate plea. I swallowed it whole and let it sink into the pit of my stomach, where rage burned hotter than anything I had ever felt before. They thought humiliation was the end of me. They didn't see what I was building in that silence. They didn't know that silence was sharpening me. They didn't know I was already planning the day they'd choke on their own laughter. That week, the whispers followed me everywhere. At the grocery store, Mrs. Langdon smiled too sweetly and said, "Honey, maybe if you behaved, your daddy wouldn't have had to discipline you like that." At work, my manager asked me to stay extra polite with customers, as though I'd carry the filth of humiliation everywhere I went. Even at the library, where I tried to find some quiet, two boys in the corner snickered and whispered, "That's the pig from church." When I walked into the house after work, the air was thick with Melissa's voice, loud, boasting. She was showing off the very photos Mom had snapped. Dad leaned in his recliner, pride painted across his face. "That's discipline," he told her, tapping the phone screen like it was proof of his greatness. Melissa scrolled through the pictures and smirked. "You really look pathetic here. I mean, I almost feel bad for you." Almost. Then she tilted the phone toward me, flashing the photo of Dad yanking my collar, my face red, my knees scraping the ground. "This one's my favorite. It's the perfect cover photo." Mom laughed so loud it echoed down the hall. "Maybe we should blow it up and hang it on the fridge. Better yet, Christmas cards. Imagine the joy it would bring our relatives." I froze in the doorway, hands gripping the strap of my bag so tight it left dents in my palm. They didn't stop. They didn't even flinch at my silence. Dad turned his head toward me, his voice flat, sharp. "Don't stand there like a ghost. You're not family enough to haunt us." Melissa leaned forward, her eyes glittering with cruel amusement. "You should be grateful, you know. Most people wouldn't even waste church space on a pig." I walked past them without a word, but every step up the staircase felt heavier. Their laughter chased me up, clinging to my back like chains. When I closed my bedroom door, I pressed my forehead against the wood, breathing shallow. It was becoming clear. They weren't just humiliating me in public for a single moment. They wanted it to live, to last, to define me. They wanted to brand me with shame I couldn't escape. 2 nights later, Melissa barged into my room without knocking. She tossed a pile of laundry onto my bed, her perfume choking the air. "Mom says wash these. Don't shrink them like last time, Piglet." She gave me a sweet smile that made my stomach turn. "Oh, and Dad says you can't come to church this Sunday. He doesn't want the embarrassment." I stared at the pile of her silky blouses and dresses. My jaw clenched so tight my teeth hurt. "Get out!" Her smirk widened. "Oh, scary? What are you gonna do, squeal?" "Careful. You know pigs don't belong in houses either." She laughed and left, slamming the door behind her. The pile of clothes seemed to mock me, a tower of her arrogance sitting right on my bed, my fists curled, nails cutting into my palms. Sunday came, and as promised, they all left without me. Dad in his pressed suit, Mom in her floral dress, Melissa glowing in pastel satin. The front door slammed, their laughter floating down the driveway. Silence filled the house. And in that silence, my rage breathed. I walked into the living room, looked at the family portraits on the wall, Melissa front and center. Mom's arm looped around her, Dad's smile proud. My own face was either cropped at the edge or blurred in the background, as if I were an accident they couldn't quite erase. I stood there for a long time, my chest heaving, staring at those photos. That's when I realized something with a clarity that almost frightened me. I was done begging to exist in their world. I didn't want their scraps of love anymore. I wanted something else entirely. That night at dinner, Melissa couldn't stop herself from bragging. "Everyone at church asked about you," she smirked, stabbing her fork into her steak. "I told them you were probably too busy rolling in the mud." Mom chuckled, sipping her wine. "They should thank us for keeping the filth outside." Dad pointed his knife at me like it was a warning. "You better remember, girl, this family runs on respect, and respect means knowing your place." I looked at him, then at Melissa, then at Mom. My lips curved into a small, quiet smile. It wasn't joy. It wasn't kindness. It was something darker. And for the first time, they all went silent, their laughter dying in their throats for a moment. I lowered my eyes, kept chewing slowly, and said nothing. Because the moment I smiled, I knew. They thought their cruelty was breaking me, but they were feeding something far stronger, something patient, something waiting, and they would never see it coming. The breaking point came on a Wednesday evening. Melissa was sprawled across the couch, scrolling her phone, smirking at something she'd clearly been waiting to show me. "Look," she called, turning the screen toward me. It was me. The photo Mom had taken Dad dragging me by the collar, my face twisted with pain. Someone had posted it to a community page with the caption, "Pigs don't sit in God's house." Hundreds of laughing reactions, comments piling underneath. "Looks like you're famous," Melissa said, giggling. "Don't worry, little piglet. Everyone already knew. Now it's just official." Mom laughed from the kitchen. "She should be honored. Finally, she's useful for something." Dad didn't look up from his chair. He just muttered, "Let them laugh. Maybe it'll teach her." My chest burned, but I didn't yell, didn't cry, didn't throw the phone. Instead, I smiled again, quiet, controlled, that same smile that had unsettled them days earlier. Melissa's laugh faltered. "Why are you smiling?" I didn't answer. Not then. Instead, I went upstairs, and I started setting the trap. I gathered every scrap of cruelty they had thrown at me, every message, every photo, every humiliating caption Melissa had written, every comment Mom had added to fuel the laughter. I pulled it all together, not to hand over to police, not to plead with neighbors, but for something else, something far sharper. The next Sunday, I told them I would walk to church alone. They laughed, of course. Dad said, "Try not to crawl in the mud before you get there." Melissa added, "Bring a leash this time." But I didn't go to church. I went early, earlier than anyone. I slipped into the choir loft with the old key Mrs. Langdon had left behind weeks ago when she'd asked me to help carry hymnals, and I set everything up. When the pews filled and the sermon began, I waited. The air thickened with hymns and murmured prayers. Then it was time. The screen behind the pulpit flickered where verses usually appeared for the congregation to read. Instead, my parents' faces filled the screen, Melissa's too. Their voices echoed across the speakers. "Pigs don't sit in God's house. She belongs on the ground. Smile, piglet. Trash doesn't deserve respect." Gasps filled the air, heads turned. People leaned forward, eyes wide. The laughter they had once shared at my expense now froze in their throats as the screen cycled through photo after photo, Dad's fist yanking me by the collar, Mom's camera raised, Melissa doubled over in laughter. Each cruel comment, each mocking word displayed for the entire congregation. "Mom," the pastor stammered, confused, but the crowd wasn't. Whispers rose, louder and sharper, spreading like wildfire. "That's what they did? In God's house? Monsters." I stepped out of the shadows then, my footsteps echoing up the aisle. Every eye turned toward me, but this time, it wasn't with mockery. It was with something else. Horror, judgment, disgust. Dad's face drained of color. "What have you done?" he hissed, his voice barely audible over the growing murmurs. I stopped, halfway down the aisle, my voice steady, loud enough to cut through the noise. "You told me pigs don't sit in God's house, but tell me who looks like pigs now." Melissa shot to her feet, face blazing red. "Turn it off, now!" she screamed, but the voices on the speakers only grew louder, replaying her taunts again and again. "Trash, piglet, filth." Mom tried to grab my arm, her nails digging into my skin. "You'll regret this," she spat. But when she turned, the crowd had already pulled back, eyes filled with disgust at her, not me. And then it happened, the laughter. Not at me this time. At them. It started with a snicker in the back, then a chuckle near the front, and within seconds the whole church was laughing, pointing, shaking their heads. For the first time in my life, I watched my parents and sister drown in the very humiliation they had forced me to live in. Dad's face twisted, veins bulging at his temple as he roared, "Stop laughing!" But no one listened. Mom's phone slipped from her hand, shattering against the floor. Melissa covered her ears, tears streaking her mascara. I didn't touch them. I didn't scream. I didn't lift a hand. All I did was watch. And as their pride crumbled, as their laughter turned to sobs, as the walls they built on my humiliation collapsed on their own heads, I finally felt free. When I turned to leave, the doors opened wide for me. No one stopped me. No one sneered. No one whispered. Behind me, their cries echoed through the church. tangled with the same laughter they once used to destroy me. And for the first time, I didn't carry their weight. I let them choke on it themselves. Please subscribe to our channel and tell us in comments from where are you watching this video.